Hello and welcome back to the Resident Evil Retrospective. This is part two. This is covering more action-focused parts of the franchise. So I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you at the end. Now, after Code Veronica, things are sort of up in the air. There were some weird things to do with contracts to do with Sony and Nintendo, because there was a massive thing about Code Veronica apparently was going to be called Resident Evil 3, and they decided it not to be that because Sony were like, do you not realize that we own all of the mainline Resi games? You can't call it Resident Evil 3 because it was a GameCube exclusive, I believe. No, it was a Dreamcast exclusive.
It's
Dreamcast because it's old as fuck. It's a Dreamcast exclusive. And then after that, you get to Capcom trying to think about what the fuck is Resident Evil 4. And now, obviously, the original... There's a lot of original concepts for Resi 4 when they were floating about, and I'm sure you've seen that original fixed camera version of Resi 4 with Leon in that jacket.
And it's on an airship, and there's a ghost going around.
There's a lot of these weird ghost mechanics and supernatural mechanics, and then a lot of some of those, not a lot of some of those, that makes no sense, but one of the original concepts for Resi 4, which was a lot more action focused, is what became Devil May Cry. So yeah, I don't know if you know that. I'm sure you do.
I know that.
Yeah, I just couldn't tell in your reaction. But yeah, so I'm not sure whether the idea was that it was like Leon with a fucking sword, but I was like,
that'd be fun.
I mean, that sounds cool as fuck. But it's they clearly decided, this doesn't feel at all like Resident Evil. Let's make this its own thing though, because it's a lot of fun. But then we eventually get round to the GameCube classic of Resident Evil 4, which is probably being played by most people on any other system apart from the GameCube.
Basically,
I've heard a lot of people talk about how a lot about how good the Wii port of it is apparently because of the accuracy with the aiming.
Yeah,
but what were you gonna say?
Oh no, I was going to say, I can imagine playing a Wii version, just pointing at shit. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, I want to try it. I definitely want to try it. Resident Evil 4. What to say about it that hasn't already been said? I simply do not know, but it stands on its own as it's definitely top tier Resi, and it's one of the most fun games in the whole franchise.
I think it's probably the most fun.
Yeah.
In terms of just pure action and them just throwing all the shit at you at once.
It's I think it's the longest Resi game as far as I'm aware.
It took me
unless you're without
6.
counting Resi 6, yeah.
Yeah, well, 6.
As a standalone campaign on its own, it's 14 hours, 6 to 15 hours.
I think it's 13, and plus you have Ada stuff, which is 2.5 hours.
I think my playtime was 14 when I first finished, but I had a great time the whole way through, and it also is incredibly consistent the whole time, tonally. Action, how they keep ramping up the action and the difficulty of the game, but also giving you new weapons to work with, new environments, new concepts to work with. It's so consistent and also feels so quintessentially Resi on top of that, because it still has, the inventory management is a major part of it, but it also added so much. The whole marketplace thing was sort of introduced first in this game, and I think that the trader dude.
What are you buying?
Yeah, he's fucking iconic.
Yeah.
They made a very, very special game of Resident Evil 4, and there's something about the pure visceral pleasure of going into an environment, shooting a guy in the head, roundhouse kicking him, shooting another guy in the head, suplexing him. It's that's so fun. And even though Resi 5 has basically the same gameplay, it doesn't quite hit the same way. There's something really visceral, and also you can't move while you're aiming in Resi 4 still.
I think that's lovely. I love that.
It adds tension to every single scenario because you have to stop moving for it. I really like Resi 4.
Also, the opening is the most iconic and perfect piece of gameplay.
And it perfectly sets you up for what the game's going to be like.
Yeah.
And it has such an action focus all the way through. But I love that opening where Leon goes into that guy's house. The guy's talking in Spanish to him. He's like, "Who the fuck are you?" and he gets his pitchfork out, and Leon's like, right, clearly I have to shoot this guy in the head and then roundhouse kick him into his own fireplace. And I just find that hilarious. He's like, I had to put him down. It's like, you didn't put him down, Leon. You fucking like stomped on his fucking skull, and it's like, what the fuck? And then you've got that amazing line, which I hope they never take out of it if they do a remake, which is, you know, where's everyone going? Bingo. And it's hilarious. And that is like the big one-liner before the title card comes up.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my God, this is perfect. Like that was what they decided to be the massive one-liner before the game really opens up and starts.
I love that.
Yeah, do you have anything to add about Resi 4?
I don't know. I think it's maybe like, it's probably the most fun, just in terms of like pure enjoyment.
Yeah.
Besides any Resi game. I think it's like, well, no, not any Resi game, but like it's just in terms of like just how much stuff you're doing. And just how like consistent it is, and just like go into a place, you immediately assess what's going on. You're like, okay, I need to plant my sniper. I'll get some headshots in, go in with a shotgun, suplex these dudes, and I'll have a good time doing it. And it's just
and the combat is so satisfying and fun, and the shooting as well just feels so polished. Even now, it's such a refined gameplay system.
Yeah.
I'm
really not sure how they're going to remake it unless they do something radically different.
I mean, something we can talk about, I guess, is like what they are definitely doing a remake.
Yeah.
They're definitely doing it. They're making it. So it's like, what are they going to do? Unless they like, because apparently, the issue with why Capcom took over development of it again was that the original team were trying to make something that was really faithful to the original Resident Evil 4. And Capcom turned around and said, no, we want something that's quite new and sort of takes the outline of Resi 4 and makes it new.
I mean, that's what I want from a remake.
Yeah, if they're going to do something, I'd much rather they you know, approach new ground as opposed to just doing a shot-for-shot remake of the original game. I'm not even sure how the combat would work. Like, in the newer engine, if they don't have the hand-to-hand combat, it's a completely different game.
Yeah, I'm also just thinking, like, if they take away, because if they had the ability to, like, move and shoot, like, I don't know how that's going to work if they, like, try and approach.
I mean, they definitely will as well. You know they will, because that's sort of a landmark of the last two remakes. So I feel like they're definitely going to let you move and shoot. So I guess all they have to do is start thinking about how do they combat that and how do they make it still challenging and still tense and still feel like the same core of a game. And this is it. We're having this discussion now, and we can't even really think about a great way to redo a lot of these aspects. Like, it's kind of already good enough.
You can't really improve.
Yeah,
it.
I think I would actually be more excited if they said we're doing Code Veronica remake as opposed to Resi 4.
Definitely, yeah.
Because, you know, I played Resi 4 only last year, and it doesn't feel like it's really aged at all. It still feels smooth as hell, and it still plays fantastically, and it's still a ton of fun. I think they're showing with Village that they understand Resi 4 in a weird way.
Yeah, because because to me, like, Resident Evil 7 feels like a blockbuster AAA version of, like, the blockbuster AAA version of the first Resident Evil.
Yeah, no, I get that. Yeah,
and to me, like, Village feels like maybe not. I mean, because Resident Evil 4 is already a blockbuster, but in terms of like just like adapting that to a modern format,
yeah,
it feels very much like that.
I think in that remake we're going to actually see quite a few assets be reused from Village.
Probably, yeah.
I think it makes complete sense for them to do that.
Yeah, because doesn't every RE Engine game have like the same every game have the same box with the yellow yellow stripes?
It just maybe with like a different color on it, but it is the same type of box. I think one of the only things they could do with the remake of 4 is make it feel consistent off of the back of the Resi 2 remake, because I can imagine that in terms of like Leon's character, and just like making his face the same. Yeah, Leon, like in terms of like his personality, he seems like a completely different dude in 4 to 2. And I understand there's time in between, but I think that's probably something they're going to do, is they're going to get the same voice actor back. They'll get the same, they'll get Ada back, and it'll be connecting back with Resi 2, and it'll feel a lot more consistent on the whole. It's weird getting into this trap, because Resident Evil 2 on its own as a remake would have been interesting. That they just remade one game and then they carried on as usual. As soon as they decided to remake 3, now you've almost got an issue, because at that point nothing is consistent.
Yeah.
You can't play 4 after 2 and think that is the same character, because it feels completely different now. So once you get to that point, the fact that they've now done 2 remakes, you're like, well, at that point, you might as well remake fucking all of them. I don't want that necessarily. I don't think it needs it, but it's also like you get to a point where now you have a sort of disjointed franchise that doesn't make much sense. And the only way you can bring that all together is if you try to, I don't know, it feels like a completely different franchise when you're comparing them.
I know. Because I do feel like maybe the best way to approach canon is like you kind of create your own canon in your head.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know. So like you say like Resident Evil 2 remakes canon, but I know Resident Evil 3 originals canon instead. Like it's canon as well. But
it's all weird.
Yeah, but like I don't feel like. I mean, I feel like they should stop after 4 if they are going to do 4. I feel they should like if they do any remakes after that, they should like not do them for many, many years.
I'm pretty sure we're definitely going to get a Resi 4 remake, Harry.
Yeah, I know it's like confirmed, but like if they do any more after 4, like it should be in like years in the future.
The only thing that I could see them trying to do, which again doesn't need it, is a remake of Resi 1 with the RE engine.
Remake a remake.
Yeah, because I know the RE engine is designed to be able to work in third person, first person, and also in fixed cameras, and they've never used it for fixed cameras. So I'd actually be interested if they released a version of Resi 1 in the RE engine that lets you choose between third person or fixed camera and stuff. But again, I don't think it's necessary, because I think the game you've already got there is already solid and doesn't need it. But yeah, we spent more time talking about the Resi 4 theoretical remake that is inevitably coming. I will have a good time with it as long as you can still suplex people. If they keep that core gameplay intact, I think it'll be perfect. Not perfect, but it'll be fine. Like it'll still be Resi 4. If they take out the hand-to-hand combat stuff and it just becomes the gameplay like Resi 2 and 3, where you can just do headshots and, you know, in Village and stuff, I think you're in for trouble there, because it's going to feel like a completely different game.
Well, I suppose you can't take it out and have it still feel the same. So I think they're gonna like. I don't think there's any way they're going to take out the hand-to-hand stuff in a remake. And I think when they do eventually reveal the remake, I think they need to do a gameplay demo at the same time.
Yeah.
Just to show, like, okay, this is what it is. There's no confusion.
Yeah. But that will probably come in about 2 years' time. I reckon we'll probably get the reveal like towards the middle or towards the end of next year.
Maybe.
Because they basically announced, like, from behind the scenes chats, it looks like it's coming out 2023 because they've had to push it back a bit. So we'll see. But I'm not. I don't feel like a core enthusiasm about it. I'm more just like interested, like, how the fuck are you going to remake Resident Evil 4? Because it doesn't even need it. Anyway, from 4, Capcom turned around and went, look at all this critical success we're getting, and also look at this financial success we're getting every time we port Resi 4, because every single person was like, this is one of the best survival horror games ever made. And like,
or isn't survival horror?
Wow, some people just called it that, but it's a horror action game, if anything. It's survival action, you know. Because Resi 4 was one of the reasons Dead Space is Dead Space.
Yeah.
Because the original drafts of Dead Space, I think it was either first person, or it was a lot more like stealth focused or something.
Right.
And then they all the team basically played Resi 4 when it came out, and they came home and they were like, scrap that. And they made Dead Space.
Well, that's because Dead Space is pretty much Resi 4 in space.
Yeah. And on a side note, you know, Dead Space is fucking fantastic.
It's a good time.
I think it's so good. I think Dead Space 1 is my favorite survival horror game. I really love Dead Space 1. Dead Space 2 is fantastic as well. You need to finish it. But we're not talking about Dead Space today. We're talking about Resident Evil. So after looking at all the critical and financial success of Resident Evil 4, Capcom went, all right, let's do it again. And they made Resi 5, which in the initial reveal trailers looks a lot more like it's Chris on his own going through hot Africa slums and like trying to find Umbrella or whatever he's fucking doing. That's what the initial draft looks like. And if you watch the initial reveal trailer, it's quite different in tone, actually, in art design in a lot of aspects. Chris is a lot less buff.
Yeah.
It looks a lot more like Resi 4. It just looks like Resi 4 in Africa, basically.
Right.
And then at some point they were like, let's make it a co-op game because everyone likes multiplayer, and let's put Sheva in. We played Resident Evil 5 together, didn't we, Harry?
About a year ago, yeah.
Yeah.
It was a good time.
It's a fun game.
Yeah, it's a very, very fun game.
It still has a core of Resident Evil in that gameplay because it has the core of Resi 4's gameplay in it, and it also has, you know, some of the series staples and the fact that it's like the big tie-up of the Umbrella Wesker, you know, thing, and also bringing Jill back for it. But if you compare that to Remake, for example, it feels a completely different franchise. So it's a very interesting game. I wouldn't say it's a great horror action or survival horror game or anything like that. I would say it's a very fun action game.
Yeah, I think it's like, well, I mean, Resident Evil 5 to me is just like Resident Evil 4, but just like worse in every way. But it's still really good because it's still Resident Evil 4.
I mean, Resident Evil 4 is sort of up there, and then Resi 5 brings it down a little bit, but it's co-op, and it's good. It's co-op Resi 4 that's not as good, but it's still fun.
Yeah.
I like a lot of the bosses in Resi 5, and I think, as we were discussing earlier, I think they used the 2-player thing quite interestingly with some of those mechanics.
Sorry. Because with those bosses, I feel like all the bosses in the game are good, besides the human bosses. Because you remember there's that Jill boss fight, which took us like 2 hours to do.
Oh, that's so stupid.
Yeah.
we could not figure out what was happening in that scene. And we kept trying to rip the thing off her chest, and we were just like, "This is ridiculous. What we doing wrong?" It turns out you're meant to just shoot it. Yeah. But I had no idea. It's and the Wesker fight at the end is interesting, but it doesn't feel polished. I don't know how to put it. It kind of feels like you're kind of just shooting shit and like guessing what's going to work, and then eventually the fight ends, and you're like, oh, I guess that was the right thing to do. But yeah, 5 is a very fun time, and the story isn't anything necessarily to latch onto, but it is solid enough that you can sit down for a couple of days and play it with someone. I would suggest you play it co-op. I think it shines in co-op much better. And yeah, like I was saying, I like that boss fight where one of you has to use the flamethrower and the other one has to like shoot the weak points. It feels really interesting as a concept to try and use cooperative play in like interesting ways. The thing is, in Resi 4, there are still puzzles.
Yeah.
In Resi 5, there is barely any puzzles. There's some like environmental things with like moving mirrors, but apart from that, there's literally no puzzles in the game as far as I can remember. And it's at the point of that where it stops feeling like Resi so much because it doesn't have that exploration. Resi 5 is Resi 4 without the exploration and without the interesting inventory, without the, you know, as much of the goofiness, and without like without the puzzles.
Well, I mean, like each Resident, like, because with 4, 5, and 6, each one like feels way less Resident Evil than the other one.
Yeah.
Because like 4, like it still has limited inventory, and it's like, and you still like there's a lot of inventory management, not in terms of like carrying key items and stuff like that, like in 1, 2, and 3, but just in terms of like just like figuring out like how everything fits in. There's like Tetris, and you have like 5, and it's like you have 9 spots, and like a rocket is the same size as like 15 handgun shells. And then you get to 6, and it's just like you have like a single line of stuff, and like
which doesn't have a limit on it, as far as I'm aware.
No, it doesn't have a limit, but like
you can just pick up as many weapons as you want, kind of. Though it's like you can just sort of mix and match. But yeah. 5 is definitely the sign of where they went. Okay, action is why people play this. And I think it's also with 5 and 6 especially, you see them less about creatively how do we make this interesting and refresh, which is what it feels like they did for 4. It instead feels more like, how do we appeal to the widest demographic?
Yeah.
And they thought, a multiplayer game in this vein. Let's do it. And it's fun. You know what? I like Resi 5. I think it ties up the Wesker stuff really well. I like the final bits with Wesker and Chris obviously punching a boulder, which is iconic at this point. And then, blowing up Wesker together as part of like a cutscene quick time event with 2 rockets. Brilliant stuff. And also, we also played the DLC packs that they released for it.
Yeah, they were pretty fun.
There's that one which is kind of like going around the Spencer Mansion. And I remember us playing it, and I was like, "This is an interesting way of doing like a Resi game. Keeping it co-op, but putting it in those corridors, putting it in those situations, and suddenly it's like, oh, this comes together really, really well.
Because it still really feels like because that's because that DLC, like, it still feels quite Resident Evil, though. It's still like everything about it's Resident Evil 5.
Yeah.
Because you have and there's like that bit where you fall into the dungeon. You have to like navigate around, like avoiding the enemies.
I remember
That's
that.
really fun.
And it's quite creepy as well.
Yeah.
It's nothing special, but it does enough that you're like, oh yeah, this is what Resident Evil co-op could feel like. This is what it could be. Because also there's puzzles in that section. I remember there's quite a few like more puzzle scenarios or like puzzle combat things, and it feels very much like Resident Evil. It's an interesting little DLC pack, and obviously you got the other one which is kind of just like a time trial action thing.
I don't know. Is it timed?
It's not timed, but it's like you're kind of just running and killing to get to like a destination. Yeah,
it's like Jill and the other guy.
Yeah, so that's fine. But yeah, Resident Evil 5 is a fun time. I would suggest you play it with someone, with a person. Don't do split screen, because for some reason the way they decided to do split screen is fucking awful. Where they just put like 2 squares on top of the screen, which is like the worst way to do split screen imaginable. But do just get a copy. You can get it for so cheap now as well. And it's a really good, I don't know, 8 or 9 hours?
Probably 10 hours, yeah.
Yeah.
Like a bit
the first time I played Resi 5, I sat with Keanu, a mutual friend, I guess, of ours. And we sat and played the whole thing in one sitting. And by the time we got to the end, I think we wanted to kill each other. Because he wasn't very good at the game. And I just thought the game was really difficult. Turns out it was just my partner, because when we played through the exact same sections together, you and me, on a higher difficulty as well, you and me played it on, and we didn't have any issue with those segments. And I was like, oh right, yeah, that was just a really bad playthrough where we were tired off to sit, like it was like 7 a.m. the next morning and we didn't want to see each other anymore. But yeah, I do like Resi 5 a lot, and I think it's a good time. On the other hand, we have Capcom again going, well, clearly Resi 5 made so much money, we're gonna triple down on the fucking action, and we're going to make Resi 6, which
I love
that. For Resi 6, it was like they decided this was going to be the end of this franchise in some regards, or maybe at that point they were thinking this is going to be the last mainline Resi or something. And they were like, all right, let's bring in all the stops and get all the characters apart from Jill. No one wants to fucking work with Jill for some reason. And let's finish it. Yeah. Now, we played all of the game. Yeah. I didn't finish the Ada section.
I did.
Was it good?
It's fine.
It's whatever. It doesn't feel... what we played of it didn't feel like necessary story stuff.
Yeah, it's really
but we played through all of the main campaigns. Yeah. And we started with Leon's, which I think is the thing that most people would do.
Yeah, because like Leon's the most popular Resident.
Yeah, and it also feels like as they were advertising it, it feels like, oh, it's a quintessential RE playthrough. Now, on paper, it sounds cool. It's a co-op game, but it's Leon and his partner. I can't even remember her name. Helena or something. Yeah, my favorite iconic character, Helena. And you're in zombie-infested streets again, and all this other stuff. And you're like, cool, let's do it. It was boring.
I think Leon's is like definitely the worst.
Yeah,
it's just kind of like 2 logs. It's like 7 hours. It's like a full game.
Yeah, it's like a massive game, and it's not great, and it's kind of boring.
Well, for Leon's, I think. But I think Chris and Jake.
Well, we're just talking about Leon's campaign for the time being. But I think Leon's campaign is kind of boring, and it goes on a bit too long, and also. Weirdly enough, I think the fact that you're fighting zombies, it doesn't actually help the game because the enemies aren't interesting.
Go down so easily.
Yeah, they also reconfigured the gameplay in 6, and they made it all about tapping R2.
I love
So
it.
it's all about smacking, doing stuff. It's
It's like all these
insane.
combos on like zombies. Just
And it is fun in a degree. And sometimes you're like twisting heads off and shit. And you're like, what the fuck is happening? But I got to admit, I don't think it's as fun as Resi 5 or 4's gameplay.
I'd say, I'd say, I'd say it's more fun than 5.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because like five's good, but it feels kind of stale, and like the level design is like kind of okay, whatever. Because like everything's so wide and open.
I get that. I think it's just in 6, I don't like the tapping R2 and doing all the rest of it and jumping on your back and shooting. Like, that's all really cool. That's really great gameplay. I do like it, but I don't like it as much as Leon's, shoot in the head, roundhouse kick, and like that like tactile like fear factor of getting too close and stuff. I don't know. I think that's a lot more satisfying to play through. But 6 definitely upped the gameplay into a full-on action game.
Yeah,
like, no one is arguing at that point. You're rolling on the floor and jumping about,
sliding.
and you can jump in any direction and shoot whilst you're jumping. But that's insane.
I love
But
it.
it's a lot of fun. But it's just, I think with Leon's campaign, it just goes on a bit too long, and it's just not interesting enough in terms of narrative to keep you invested. You're kind of just playing because you're like, okay, let's keep going. On the other hand, Chris and Jake's campaigns are fucking awesome.
I love them.
we played Jake's 1 second.
Yeah.
And Jake is the son of Wesker, I believe, is like the thing. And his whole thing is like he's got hand-to-hand combat as like a main weapon.
Superpowers.
Yeah. It's so fun. And him and Sherry's campaign feels true to Resi. It feels like it's innovating on like Resi's story because it's Sherry from 2, but also it's following on Wesker in a different light as like a main character. Voiced by Troy Baker as well, which is, always great. But it's a really fun campaign. And then you've got like this nemesis-like enemy of Ustanak, which it culminates in you doing a fist...
That boss fight.
It's a hand-to-hand fist fight over like a pit of lava. It's awesome!
And then he like chases you on the train thing.
Yeah.
And you have to like
blows
shoot
up.
him at the same time with like
so good.
Like a revolver.
It's really good. I remember really enjoying Jake's campaign, and then we played Chris's campaign, which goes fucking mental in the last like hour. Goes absolutely fucking mental. Chris's whole thing is, again, he's a drunk. And he's like harassing people at a bar because he let all his men die in some thing.
Yeah.
And then I can't even remember his partner's name.
Pierce, I think.
Pierce, you're right.
Yeah.
And it's a fun enough campaign. You've got some interesting boss fights. And then the final boss fight, Pierce gets fucking electric powers and he becomes like Sea Thor. I can, yeah, and we were playing it, and I was like, "Oh shit, I can shoot lightning at this boss and stuff." It's insane. It makes no fucking sense, and I'm like, "This is brilliant." I think it's a weird scenario where I think almost the game could have been a better game if they didn't focus so much on Leon's campaign being like the big one that you play the game for, and instead it was like, let's put as much effort into each of these campaigns and make them all equal length.
Yeah.
I think you could have come up with something more interesting, but as it is, I think Jake and Chris's campaigns are more than worth playing 6 for.
Yeah, and I do feel like if Leon's was like 4 or 5 hours long, and it was like more in line with Jake and Chris's, it would be much better.
It's a weird thing with 6 where we were talking about how the fact that they stopped doing puzzles really. And there are moments in 6, especially in Leon's campaign, where they try and put like puzzle mechanics in it, or you have to unlock a door or whatever. And it's weird because actually in this game, you're kind of sat there like, I don't want to do puzzles.
Yeah.
You're actually at the point it's like, well, what I enjoy is tapping R2 and smacking zombies into the floor, not doing puzzles. So it's a weird situation. But 6, I think, was a massive financial success.
It made a lot of money.
Yeah. It did a ton. It did a lot of good. And, you can say what you want about 4, 5, and 6 and how that trajectory went, but Capcom didn't milk it. They made the games they wanted to make. They made a trilogy, essentially. And they thought, right, that's it. They didn't go, we're going to make one of these every single year and it's going to be the same thing, but it's got slightly different gameplay because people keep buying it. They were making tons of money and they thought, we're still just going to make the amount that we want to we want to make. I think also Resi 6 was really expensive to make.
Well, yeah, because I think Resident Evil 6 had like over 1,000 developers working on it.
That's crazy.
There's so much stuff. That's such like a content-rich game.
It is. There's a
Like,
lot
so
going
much
on.
shit.
And when it came out, there was a lot of multiplayer content as well, like actual competitive multiplayer and other things going on. But yeah, Resi 6 is Resi 6, and it has weird moments and awkward boss fights, but also the core gameplay at its core, most base level is quite fun, and that's a sort of enough to keep you going and playing through. I wish that Leon's campaign was just a bit better.
Yeah.
Because the other two were just actually really solid, and I think we both had a really good time playing them. So after 6, I think before 6 actually, it's definitely before 6. Operation Raccoon City came out.
I haven't played it. I don't know.
I bought it on release day, so I had never played a Resident Evil game in my life before. I saw the trailers for Operation Raccoon City, and I thought that looks like an interesting, fun game. So I remember I traded in something, and I went when I was at the game store, and I was like, I want Operation Raccoon City, and they were like, we don't have it in stock. So me and my dad, we drove like 50 miles, which to the nearest like Argos that had it in stock, because I wanted it, and he was like, "Oh, we'll just have a day out." Went to go get it. I brought it home. I fucking hated it. I played it most of that evening, and I played it a bit the next morning. And he was like, "How is it?" And I was like, "I don't really like it, Dad." I didn't finish it. I just remember playing up to a point where you fight Mr. X, and he's just like a bullet sponge, and I was like, "This is not great." I have loaded up the PC version in the last couple of months, and whilst it wasn't amazing, I had a good enough time with it that I was like, "Yeah, this isn't awful. It's just like third-person shooting Resi without the hand-to-hand stuff. Like it's fine. It's just a Resi game that's sort of reliving the moments of the series, and I think towards the end you get the choice to kill Leon or join him or something. It's a weird offshoot, and I don't think it was a great game, but it's fine for what it is. To conclude the story of Raccoon City, though, I traded it in after playing it for like 6 hours, and I went and bought Connect Star Wars instead. So you can tell that when I was younger, I made only good game decisions. To be fair, I think I probably had more fun with Connect Star Wars at the time.
That's a pretty fun game.
It's dumb as fuck, and it doesn't even work. But I played it. Operation Raccoon City is one of those ones that I kind of want to give another shot.
Yeah,
and I think I'd want to play it with you probably, and just sit and play it, because I think Resi 5 I wouldn't have had such a good time with it if I was playing on my own. I don't think I would have had such a good time with Resi 6 if I was just playing it on my own either. So I think I would like to give Operation Raccoon City another shot, and I think it's probably fine. It's probably a pretty okay co-op shooter.
My laptop can't run it. I tried running it and it's like too slow.
Oh really?
Yeah, my laptop's not great.
Well, one day we'll figure it out. One day.
Yeah.
So after 6, I'm not really sure what was going on with Resi. I don't know how many spin-offs there were.
I mean, between 6, Revelations came out.
Well, that's what I'm saying, yeah. Okay. But before Revelations, I'm not sure if there was anything for a while, because I think they just sort of took a step back and like, well, what do we do with this next? So when Revelations 1 originally came out, it was a 3DS port. It was an exclusive for 3DS, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I played Revelations. I played Revelations 1 and 2. I despise Revelations 1.
Yeah.
I hate it.
I think it's like the most milquetoast kind of
when it came out, a lot of people were praising it for like being like a return to form.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't so much about action. It was a bit slower pace, but it's still very much an action game.
Definitely, yeah.
And I just didn't like the setting. I wasn't wild about the characters, and I didn't like it.
I suppose also because like it's a 3DS game ported to ported to bigger consoles. It's like the shooting doesn't really translate very well.
No, it doesn't. And also the environments and everything don't really look great, regardless of what you play it on. I didn't like it. It's one of the only Resi games that I finished, and I was like, I didn't enjoy that. And it also felt like it was going on for ages and ages. And then you kill like a boss with like a minigun section. I'm like, great, the game's over, and it still goes on for another couple of chapters. You're like, what the fuck is happening?
Because you go in like a ghost ship or something like that.
Yeah, and then and then you go into like a flashback sequence for some reason again, and I was like, I don't want to kill any more hunters. I'm just bored. And then you have the final fight with that dude in this ghost ship or whatever, and then it's finally fucking over, and it's done. It's like great. I didn't feel like I got anything out of it. I didn't like the setting and I didn't like the story, and it felt cheap. And actually, I enjoyed it less than Resi 6. I was just like, I don't really enjoy this game, and I never plan on doing a replay of it.
No, I think it's definitely like the most kind of game in the series where there's like nothing really.
I almost felt annoyed I'd spent money on it.
I wouldn't say that, but
I clearly enjoyed it a lot less than you, but I had no time for it at all. I finished it and I was like, I really feel like I wasted my time. Which is not how I feel, however, about Revelations 2. I think Revelations 2 is actually a really good time.
Yeah.
The combat, the shooting, and because it was designed for proper consoles as well.
Yeah.
It feels like a step up, but also they decided to do something unique with you can play it in co-op, but your co-op partner doesn't necessarily have combat capabilities in the same way as you do. They have unique mechanics and unique things they can do in combat when within fights, which I thought was just really interesting. We didn't play this one together. We both played it on our own. And I actually think it would be interesting to try out just because, one of those characters don't have the same combat offensive abilities. It's all more about like, there's a stealth focus with some of it. It's weird because when you play Barry's playthrough of Revelations 2, it kind of reminded me of Last of Us.
Yeah, I get that. It does feel like it took a lot from that.
Yeah, it's like they were like, yeah, we're going to replicate Last of Us. It was also a weird game in some ways because it was released episodically. It was actually released episodically, wasn't it, when it first came out?
Yeah. Probably the episodes were released like 1 week apart. And it was
right,
all
okay.
finished.
But I actually found the story of Revelations interesting. And there was something about when I was playing it, especially the opening when you're in that asylum sort of area.
That's really good.
I was playing it and I was like, I feel genuinely kind of disturbed by the enemy design here.
Yeah.
Like, the enemy design of these guys, like, who have been clearly tortured and all the rest of it and all this other stuff. And I was like, I'm unnerved. Like, this is actually disturbing. And there's a lot of stuff in the game that genuinely feels disturbing. These ideas of like this decrepit town and this old fucking Alex Wesker, who's this like hideous creature. All of those aspects, it came together and I was like, this is unnerving. It feels gross. I don't know how to describe it. It feels dirty and gross. And I've not really experienced that in any of the other Resi games.
Yeah, I mean, like the whole, like, it kind of feels like a sword. Like, I mean, the whole, because the whole
like a saw
kind of,
trap.
like a saw trap, yeah.
Yeah.
Like a saw bit, yeah.
The whole first section in the asylum, I was like, this reminds me of Saw.
Yeah.
And that was what was really interesting about it to me. The only issue I had with Revelations 2 was there is 2 endings essentially, and it depends on whether Moira picks up a gun and shoots or doesn't. I didn't realize that the option flashed weirdly for me, so I didn't press it when I was playing the game.
Right.
And so I got the bad ending, which is Barry fucks up, the girl gets killed, and then becomes Alex Wesker reincarnated or whatever. And I was like, that's the game?
The good ending is so fun, though.
That's the ending of the game? And I was like, oh, fuck. Then I looked it up and I was like, okay, I'll try this other ending. And I played it and I was like, that was a much better ending. And that was actually really fun and felt like a celebration of Resident Evil and all this other stuff. But the problem was, because I had to replay stuff to get there, and because I also had already had the burn of the other ending, and I was bored of having to replay stuff just to see this other ending, it kind of bummed it out for me. I kind of wish there wasn't another ending, because it doesn't add much that there is another ending. So they should have just kept one, because if I had that as my finale in the playthrough, I would have been like, that was awesome. I had a great time playing that. That was a great finale. But instead, it was more of like a damp squib of an ending. And then I had to replay more time and I didn't really care. And I was like, for fuck's sake, I had to, sit and play this just to see what this other ending was. And I definitely had a much better time with that other ending, but I just wish that was the only one that was there.
I understand that, yeah. I agree.
Because one ending is just literally like the boss fight that you already have in the good ending. And then and but then it's a shit depressing ending where everyone's fucked up and his daughter actually is dead, and like I was like, oh my god, that's horrific. Whereas the other ending is just so much better in like every single way. I'm not really sure why they tied that to a choice. I'm not really sure why they even put it in the game.
Yeah,
It doesn't add much.
no, because like it doesn't really increase replayability.
No,
It's like
it's literally just a different cutscene, which you would normally just look up on YouTube. I did play the DLC for it as well, which you play as Moira doing like a load of different like wave-based
yeah, that one was really annoying. 'Cause I
things.
got right to the end of it, and I died. Like literally
Right.
one enemy left, and because it deletes your save file.
Yeah. But I did finish that, and it ties back in with the ending of the good ending of Revelations.
Yeah.
And it also had a pretty good mercenaries mode when it came out. It's just
Is it called like raid mode or something like that?
yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Which is cool. It's fine. Revelations 2 is a pretty solid game. I don't think I'm going to replay it anytime soon, but I enjoyed it enough that I would recommend it to people.
Yes.
I think it's a really good middle ground between action-based Resi. But again, the problem is that like the core gameplay isn't that fun. It is just like shooting.
Yeah, I get what you mean there. Apart from like
The guns feel infinitely better than Revelations 1, though. I will say that. Like, infinitely better. Like, everything feels a lot more crunchy, and like the actual aiming and all of it, it just feels so much better than Revelations 1.
and I suppose also like Revelations 2's combat isn't that interesting apart from with the co-op stuff. I think that makes it a lot more palatable
Yeah.
and interesting because you can always swap to the other character and
Yeah.
stuff like that. It's still quite fun in that
Yeah.
way.
No, it's a decent game, and it's worth playing, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's essential.
No.
But that sort of wraps up the second segment of this retrospective, which is suplexing a boulder section. I think out of the 3 sections that we're splitting this into, it's definitely my least favorite section.
It's the least interesting
As a whole.
The worst games.
Yeah, but it's interesting that 4 is what kicks it off, and that is basically one of the best Resident Evil games. So it's just an interesting development for Resident Evil as a franchise. So that was part 2 of the Resident Evil retrospective. I hope you had a good time with it. The final part 3, will be up within the next couple of days. So keep an eye out for it. And yeah, hope you're all ready for Resident Village coming out later this week.